Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming to today's event with Bozeman Actors Theatre about Polaroid stories. We are going to start with reading a land acknowledgement, and Maeve, our Honors Presents apprentice, is going to take that away for us.
We begin today by acknowledging with honor and respect the Indigenous nations on whose traditional territories the university now stands and whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. We also acknowledge the elders, past and present, including MSU's current Council of the Elders, and humbly ask for their guidance. The Valley of the Flowers has been and remains a place of learning for Native American peoples, who for millennia have passed ways of knowing, being, and doing from one generation to the next. While a land acknowledgement is not enough, it is an important social justice and decolonial practice that promotes Indigenous visibility and a reminder that we are on settled Indigenous land.
Thank you, Maeve. Well, again, welcome everybody to today's event. Today we have Bozeman Actors Theatre with us in a panel discussion. And Bozeman Actors Theatre is in the middle of performing Polaroid Stories, which is a play loosely based on Ovid's Metamorphoses, set in a modern inner city, a world filled with homeless young people in search of who they are, what their purpose in life is, and the utter hopelessness of their situation. This play provides a very strong foundation to have discussions related to drug abuse, prostitution, homelessness, and poverty. This event provides an opportunity for the audience to enter into a discussion with the play's director and dramaturg, as well as the actors who performed the gut-wrenching scenes. So let's go ahead and meet the panelists. If you'd like to unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are. We can start with Mark. I have you on my screen.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Koontz, and I'm the director of Polaroid Stories.
If you want to tag someone, we can do that way too.
Okay, yeah. Tag, you're it, Ben.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Lubner. I'm the dramaturg for the production, and I teach in the English department on campus and in the Honors College. I see some names that I know and some that I don't. Go ahead, Andrew.
Hey, I'm Andrew Rathgeber. I am an actor in the production. I play G. I also am the fight director for the production and happy to be here. I guess I was supposed to tag somebody. Kata, you're it.
Hi, I'm Catherine Freed. I'm playing Narcissus in the production, and I'm also very happy to be here today. Hunter.
Hi, I'm Hunter Hash, and I play Skinhead Boy in the production and work, so forgive me, I'm a little tired. You're it.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tiambo Makuchu. I play Orpheus in the production, and I'm also the choreographer. And I think that's a lot of us. So I'll pass it back to you, Kate.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here today. And we are going to go ahead and get started with Ben introducing what this show is. For those of you who may not have been able to come the past 2 weekends, it is showing, I believe, again this weekend. So if you weren't able to go, buy your ticket.
I think you're muted, Ben.
There we go. All right, everybody good with my slideshow? Sweet. At least I hope everybody's good with me and can hear me now. So yeah, there are still 3 more shows this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. I know that tickets are going fast. I'm not sure how many are left. Some of those shows might already be sold out. So if you haven't already gotten tickets and you haven't seen the play yet and you think that you might want to see it, you might want to open another tab right now and go ahead and get your tickets. So I just want to talk maybe for 4 or 5 minutes as briefly as I can here before we start the sort of general discussion, just kind of give you an overview of the play. There are sort of multiple stories happening in it simultaneously. This can make it a little bit confusing. But as it goes on, it tends to sort of resolve itself. At least that's been the experience of most of my students who have already seen it. They've started to figure things out. They know that it's based on Ovid's Metamorphoses, a collection of myths with which we're mainly familiar culturally: Narcissus and Echo, Zeus and Semele, Hades and Persephone, Orpheus and Eurydice, and so on. But I think that if you go through the production just kind of trying to figure out which character in the play is which character from the mythology, you risk kind of turning the whole event into something of an intellectual exercise, as a result of which you're going to lose the emotional experience. So I think you only want to do that up to a certain point. It's not exactly how I would recommend watching the play. Let's see if I can do that. Okay. I think that the emotional experience of the play is much more important than just the intellectual exercise of figuring out which character in the play corresponds to which figure from Ovid's Metamorphoses. This is a play that's sort of very much about real people who are experiencing the world today, in our day and age, or at least in the 1999 in which the play was written. And so focusing on those stories, I think, should take precedent over the act of figuring out, the mythological correlations. The play deals with, as Kate already mentioned, people who have been kind of kicked to the curb by society, marginalized, outcast, rendered invisible, and sort of maltreated, disadvantaged, as a result of which they're sort of excluded from mainstream society and just trying to figure out basically how to survive. Where this is, for me anyways, where the real kind of pith of the production is. So then why would Naomi Iizuka, the playwright, even bother then with underpinning these people's stories with all of these allusions to classical mythology? Why not just tell their stories themselves? I think there are a couple of good reasons for this, right? The first of which is to sort of indicate that the kinds of things that we see happening in the play and in our world today are things that have always been going on for thousands of years. It's nothing new, and I don't think that the reason you would want to make this point is to just sort of indicate that it's helpless and never can change. I think it's quite the opposite. That you want to indicate that these susceptibilities on our part to power, to control, to desire, to despair are just sort of hardwired within us and part of the human condition, where if we actually really want to seriously alter and address them, it's going to take really, really hard work on our part, basically like a daily practice that's vigilant in its nature. It's not something that we can do piecemeal with a little gesture here and a little gesture there. And I think it's important to understand how sort of deeply embedded within us these susceptibilities are. The second reason why I think it's a really good idea to underpin these stories with allusions to classical mythology, has to do with the fact that in doing so, the playwright accords these characters, these figures who have been marginalized and excluded and overlooked and neglected, a kind of classical dignity or sort of tragic dignity in integrity that we often don't afford them in our own lives, when we're perhaps more prone to, ignore them or look the other way or sort of turn the other cheek. Not turn the other cheek, sorry, that's the wrong expression there, but you get the drift. Sweep them under the rug, I'll use another cliche, that kind of thing. Instead of sort of looking at them squarely and understanding that they're reflections of us and that we're reflections of them. So I think that when you underpin their stories with all of these allusions to classical mythology, you make a lot of those kinds of connections more clear, so that for the audience, it makes it a little bit easier to see themselves in the characters and to see the characters in themselves as well, which is kind of what I think the whole point of really good drama ought to be. So that's my little opening spiel, and yeah, I hope that wasn't too long. I hope that was brief enough, and that we haven't lost half our audience already. And because now I want to talk to all the actors with the rest of you and with Mark. So Kate, you just want to like override me again in my slideshow?
Sure. Yes, there we go.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah. All right, thank you so much for the introduction. Hopefully that helps for those of you who have not seen the production. And if you have not, don't be afraid to ask questions, clarifying questions, as well as content, thematic, anything. Don't be afraid to pipe up and ask anything during this event. But we are going to start with some of our discussion questions that we came up with. And this was one that was submitted by a student, and I thought this was interesting. Why was Polaroid Stories chosen as the first show coming out of lockdown? I don't know who would want to start with that.
I'll take that. So, Polaroid Stories wasn't chosen specifically to be the first show coming out of lockdown. Hey, lockdown's over, let's do Polaroid Stories, because everyone needs, some uplifting content to get them through the rest of the. No, that's not really the reasoning behind it. It was simply a product of the fact that we were halfway through rehearsal exactly 1 year ago today, in fact, when we decided to cancel the production, or rather postpone the production. And at that time, of course, we didn't know when or if we would be able to get back to it. But we had we'd completed about half the rehearsal process 1 year ago today, and then we had to go into lockdown. So the intention for Bozeman Actors Theatre was always to return to the production once we were able to bring people back into a live theater setting. Some of the early questions were, "Hey, let's just do a virtual production of Polaroid Stories." And I said, as director, I want to put the nix on that one. I just don't think. To me, I didn't want to tell this story virtually. I think that it would have lacked the raw power that the live performance has. So it was always important to me that we get back to eventually doing a live performance of it, and I was willing to sacrifice the production if in fact we weren't able to do it live. So luckily we were able to come back full circle a year later and lead out of the gate with this production, which was really more of an experiment rather, more than anything else. As far as COVID goes, like, can we do a play in COVID? I wonder. Is it time? Is it too early? Too soon? Too soon? So we tried it as an experiment, and there were a lot of challenges, to say the least. But I think overall it was a successful experiment, and people have come out, albeit in a limited capacity due to our, our audience caps. But everybody that has come to the production seems to be like, "Hey, this is great. Live theater is back." So it was really just sort of continuing what we started last year, I guess, is the answer there.
I don't know if anyone else would want to add on, but even if it wasn't chosen necessarily as the first show coming out of lockdown, how is it significant that this is the first for Bozeman Actors Theatre?
Anyone else want to grab that? Okay, I'll grab it.
I was just going to say, you go, Mark. Go ahead.
No, you go, Ben. We can.
All right. Yeah, I don't really have an answer to the question, in any sort of precise fashion or anything. But insofar as the play sort of does kind of deal with a pretty bleak underworld that the characters have found themselves ensnared in and are struggling to emerge from. It might be something that even if our own sort of like material circumstances are different, we can all relate to in some way, shape, or form, based on the fact that for the past year we've maybe felt similarly in terms of being ensnared in some sort of bleak dystopian landscape that we're struggling to emerge from.
Yeah, I think the humanity of the play is going to always be relevant. Given the fact that Bozeman Actors Theatre is able to take certain chances, certain risks, theatrical risks as far as what they produce as a nonprofit theater, that I mean, we can perform for 25 people, and a lot of theaters can't open because they have to play to all these big audiences, and they have to do known titles with a name recognition that people will come out and see. So we're able to take a risk with Polaroid Stories, which is not a title that a lot of people are aware of, and perhaps a little bit of a darker subject matter that we would normally focus on. So the fact that nobody's seen theater in a year enables us to take certain theatrical risks that we might not necessarily be able to take, which was refreshing for me, but I like dark stuff. So
I'd also like to say that over the span of a year, we've seen such incredible levels of homelessness around the world, and we're seeing. I mean, we've already had an awareness, but just how how many failings this country is experiencing systemically in trying to deal with homelessness. And so I think that bringing that conversation to the attention of people who are able to go see theater right now is significant. So I'll offer that as well.
Have you ever heard the theory as to why all opera is so depressing? So that everybody's lives were just so horrible that when they went to the theater and they saw somebody else's life that was just infinitely more tragic, then it would make them feel some better about themselves. The old Schadenfreude adage. So, maybe we could bank on that a little bit, Mark.
yeah, I get what you're saying, Hunter. I don't necessarily want people to leave Polaroid Stories feeling better about their situation, though.
Maybe not the right message.
Yeah, maybe not.
That segues pretty nicely, though, into the next question, which was, how did the show change from last spring, pre-COVID, to now?
Well, we're on our third recasting. That's a big change. We had an original cast, and then we had a second cast, and so this is our third cast. We lost people who had to leave town and go back to see their families, and they never came back to Bozeman. We lost people because they just didn't feel comfortable entering into our rehearsal process during the pandemic. There were a lot of reasons why we lost actors. We preserved 5 out of the original 10, and I'd recast 5 roles. Oddly enough, it worked out to where I feel like this was the cast that it was always meant to be. So that was a huge change. We also changed designers. I'm on my 3rd lighting designer. My sound designer is the same. Just the venue is the same, but because of the COVID restrictions, I decided to use the Eagles ballroom space in a different way than I would have normally. So there were a lot of differences. Yeah. Anybody
You
else?
got a new stage manager too,
Yes.
right?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. A new stage manager. Indeed.
I actually have a question that's a follow up to that for Kata and Andrew, who are 2 of the newer cast members who weren't part of the original cast. And so I was just wondering if there was anything that either of you felt coming into a play that you already knew had been in pre-production, and the roles you were playing had been cast for other people who then had to back out of them for sort of whatever reason, probably something COVID related, where the 2 of you were able to come out and step into them, and if that was maybe just a little bit different from your normal experience of kind of getting a role in a play from the get-go, or if it just felt that way.
Well, for how much of an ensemble piece it is. It's really interesting to see that all of the scenes are pretty much played out between a very few amount of people. A lot of the well, not a lot of the actors, but a couple of the actors I hadn't worked with or even seen in a room until we had like a spacing rehearsal in the Eagles Ballroom. So I think it's a play that kind of lends itself to pocketed rehearsals in a way. Yeah, I don't know. I think very humble and gracious to be invited into the production in such a late part of the game. But and I guess Tata and I, coming from back east in Chicago, were kind of a week and a half into rehearsals before we even got into town anyway. But it's kind of, I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that question. Mark was really sure to kind of talk with us and make sure that we were on the same page and updating us the whole time and sending us messages and saying like, hey, we just had first rehearsal. Can't wait for you to get into town, which was welcoming in a way. But I guess as an actor, that just kind of, to me, puts the pressure on you to just like bring your A game whenever you show up into the room, right? And I don't know, I guess like with put in rehearsals, if you're ever understudying a show and you get put into the show, it's kind of like, well, bring enough of the show that's been developed into that point to keep the integrity of the show, but still like you were put as the understudy because you're you. So bring that into it. So I didn't really feel a whole lot of pressure in doing what the people before me had done in the past. But yeah, felt a lot of freedom in that. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Kata.
Yeah, I immediately had the mindset of, whoop, better get my booty in gear and double down and work really hard and make sure that I'm up to speed with everything because I'm entering quite late. So it was kind of a nice crash course, which was really a good way to come back to theater because I was really needing something that was consuming in this way. So that was really lovely. And it was interesting because normally when you do a show, you sit down with all of the designers in the cast, you do table reads, you get to know one another. And here I really only saw Mark and Cassidy, my scene partner, for the first, and I saw T too for choreography. But yeah. So I think the first time I actually met everyone was when we were starting to piece it all together. And at that point, you just don't really know how the show looks three-dimensionally because on the page it's one thing, but once you get to see all of the personality and color that people bring to it, it's just a complete, it's a world you can't really imagine. So it was pretty special to be able to kind of see a finished product so early on in my part of the process.
Yeah,
I'd also add.
You go, buddy.
Well, I was just gonna. This might be a nice segue into you talking, but that Mark was very much about like this is a new group of people. This is a new play. I don't think that he was trying to hold on to anything that had happened already in rehearsals.
Yeah.
And you know, people are different, right? Even the 5 people that were in the original cast, like the COVID pandemic has changed them in a certain way. It has metamorphosized them. So I think that he was very much about like not holding on to anything and just a really welcoming director in that way. So up to you on a silver platter, Mark.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was going to say. You took the words right out of my mouth. There was just no point in like relying on anything we had started to work on last year. We just had to start all over from scratch. That was the only way to go about it. T changed the choreography. He made some adjustments there. I reconceptualized the play from a movement perspective. Even scenes that I'd worked on with actors who were holdovers from last year. We just started all over. It was the only way to go about it.
If I could throw something in here, I'm Kevin. I'm the producer with the play here. Worked with this from the beginning as well too, and I've have always wanted to ask T as the choreographer. He was here on day one of the beginning go at this, and he's the choreographer. And I would really like to hear his input into this question in terms of what he saw coming into town, being here on day one and doing choreography, and what's changed from his perspective. Now I'm going to go mute and quiet again. Thank you.
Oh boy, pressure to talk. I guess just the get-go with changes. Like Mark said, I changed the choreography, but I also had a year to sit on it. And sort of initial impulses that I came into the process at the beginning of last year, had some time to mature, sitting with the play for a little longer, kind of let a couple different things come to the forefront in terms of creating the work. And like choreographically, I know one thing that changed from what we started last year into what we have now, was focusing a lot on highlighting like the relationships with the characters. Like it's something I was trying to do before, but highlighting the relationship of the characters within the choreography, and sort of reflecting the stories in almost like a choreographic dumb show. So you can kind of get like snapshots of like character relationships that are happening. I could dive deep into that, but that's just like that's one thing. Work-wise though, we were only halfway through the process to begin with, and so it wasn't necessarily too much to have to pivot with the new cast. I think everybody had a fair understanding of that. You know, COVID had definitely changed the way we were approaching the process, and that the final product isn't necessarily going to be what we envisioned to begin with, or does it necessarily have to stick to those original ideas? And Mark definitely also created a space where that was understood. There was a fluidity to the process and to how we were going about the work. So it made it so even as new cast members were added into the process, it was still pretty connected and pretty easy to follow and plug into, if that's making any sense.
Absolutely. It's pretty amazing to just notice as y'all are talking is this show about metamorphosis based on a book of transformations is happening in a time full of transformations and underwent so many transformations itself. It's just got so many layers to it, which is incredible. Um, but actually, speaking of how many layers there are in this show, I did want to touch on, so Izuka did cover a lot of ground of Ovid's Metamorphoses in this production. And Ben, you said this at the beginning, it's not an intellectual exercise of trying to pinpoint which myths are going on at what point. But as performers, how did you go about navigating all these different myths that your role goes through? Did that help to know exactly which myths you were covering as you were going through them?
You know, if I may, for a second, I guess, like, because my position was a little interesting just because my character isn't necessarily pinpointed to like a specific myth. Talking to Ben and Mark early on in the process, we kind of, I kind of came to the conclusion that's like Skinhead Boy represents man's role in all of this. He's, Adam walking through the world, all, surrounded by all these gods, and so much fun to look at Greek mythology and the fact that like there's so every god and myth is so emblematic, but at the same time they represent every facet of humanity. I mean, they represent, and like in a very very specific way, and moving through like that, it I don't know, it kind of like what Ben was saying, kind of had to focus on their needs and their wants and their place in being in real life, that kind of spoke more to yeah, I guess, if that makes any
Ben's got a really interesting way to look at it that he'll continue to say gives him a headache to think about, but is that like you're not necessarily playing the characters, but the characters are playing you. In the script for every scene, and they're kind of like French scenes, so anytime that somebody enters, there's a new scene, but it's a really fast-moving kind of kaleidoscopic work. But each scene in the play, if any of you have looked at the actual text itself, has kind of like, well, Prometheus steals fire, or Pentheus, whatever. And there's kind of a style of Brechtian theater that has maybe super titles up that's projected. And so I think that could be an interesting way to look at it, as far as this is an homage to that myth, but this is not necessarily the characters in that, but this is a reflection of the story within. So we obviously don't have that in our production. We don't have kind of the scene super titles on there. As far as the specificity, speaking for myself, I found, especially reading through it and trying to figure out, because G in the script is described as like Zeus/Hades. And I'm like, what is that? What does that even mean? Like both ends of the spectrum. And so I was kind of getting in my head a little bit in the prep work and the script work and the scene work for it, as far as like, well, which one am I right now? How am I read? What am I supposed to be? What is this scene prescribed as? Which character should this be? And then like 2 or 3 weeks into the process, I just let go of that. And I was just like, well, this is a person who holds a lot of power and can influence a lot, and doesn't really necessarily mean that he's one or the other. And like, I don't even think that in the program it really dictates that. And then I remember Gretchen, after she saw it, she came out, she's like, I think you're more Zeus than you are Hades. And by that, or that, I think you're more Hades than you are Zeus. And I was like, I think that Zeus is a little bit more Hades than we give him credit for, right? And just somebody that's going around and manipulating and controlling. So for me, kind of playing that duality, I just like forgot about that. And I was just like, well, I'm the person that holds the keys, period. So yeah, it bugged me for a little bit, but then I got over it.
So Andrew, I have a new way of trying to articulate all of this that's still not entirely satisfactory, but like I think generally in the actors, or Mark as the director, also an actor himself, could testify, like if you're in a play, you're the actor and you're playing a character, where there's two figures here. There's you, the actor, and then there's the character you're playing. And when there are only two figures in a relationship, there's only one relationship, the relationship between those two characters. But in Polaroid stories, and probably in like lots of other theater as well, and actually maybe when you get down to it, maybe this is just true of all theater actually, there's the actor, there's the character, and then there's the sort of mythological underpinning to that character as well. So there's Hunter the actor, there's Skinhead Boy the character, and then there might be Theseus, the mythological figure who's trying to figure out how to get out of the labyrinth. The interesting thing to me is that when you add that third person to the relationship, instead of there only being one relationship now between the actor and the character, when you have three figures, there's all of a sudden four relationships now. Because there's that relationship, there's that relationship, there's that relationship, and then there's the relationship between all three of them as well. So you go from 1 to 4 just as a result of adding like one layer or one component, that mythological underpinning. And I would imagine that like if you actually tried to make that cerebral and intellectualize it and sort of figure it out, it would probably become a nightmare really quick. So maybe the best thing to do is to just sort of understand that, okay, there are these three things going on: the actor, the character, and then the mythological figure who kind of underpins the character, but you can't tell which is which. I don't know which is which ultimately, sort of in the end, where you can say definitively Hunter's the actor, Skinhead Boy's the character, Theseus is the mythological underpinning. I think Theseus actually might be the actor, you know, in that, you know, Hunter might be the character, and that Skinhead Boy might be the mythological underpinning. And I just think sort of when you get into all of that, if you can just sort of like internalize that in a way that's not cerebral, where you just like absorb it and embody it, really awesome, cool things can happen on the stage, and not just on the stage, but in the audience too, insofar as the audience members recognize that, you know, what's true with respect to the people who are performing for them is true with respect to themselves as well. We all contain multitudes.
Well, and I think that's interesting with the mythological underpinning is the third part of that, in that like that's almost the audience participation, because all of mythological underpinning is I associate this with this person. So even if it's not like a mythological thing, it's like if they've seen that kind of character in Breaking Bad, that's them bringing their own mythological interpretation into that character, which, yeah, is really, really activating. It's interesting.
Yeah, and you remember that, you know, like these stories and myths, what they were created for was to explain who we are, what we're doing, why the world is the way it is. So, I mean, there's nothing that is not true about it. I mean, it is, you know, a part of each part of us, you know.
What's interesting to me as a director always is not the story that I'm telling, but the story that the audience is telling to themselves. So I encourage actors to, yeah, Izuka has given us some stories, and they're great stories. But I encourage the actors to make specific choices about their own story, follow their own instincts about who they are as a person, and then the audience will tell the story to themselves. And that's really all that matters, is what the audience takes away from it, as far as looking at it from a directorial standpoint. And in so doing, you hope to honor Izuka's work, but if the audience is coming away from the performance with a specific experience of this story that you maybe didn't plan on, then that's a great thing.
Yeah, that's a beautiful word that came up earlier. I don't recall who said this, but fluidity. I feel like we keep coming back to that idea, is there's a lot of fluidity in this performance, which is really, really amazing. So I imagine, does that make every performance different every time you do it? Do you find different things? I'm getting nods.
Well, having watched all the performances, I can say yes. The fluidity is honed to a certain specificity, but within that, actors grow within shows all the time. It's part of the process of acting, is letting things happen to you. And if things aren't happening to you, I've also stressed this on multiple occasions. If things aren't happening to you as the character for the first time, every time, then it grows stale. You have to have the discovery and the urgency of the storytelling be be happening simultaneously, and also for the first time each time. So within that, I hope they discover something new each time. And I've seen it because I've seen all the performances. But you'd have to ask the actors that to hear more specific.
Would any of you like to take a shot at that question? After this question, we are going to open it up to audience questions.
Kata, I think you should address that one.
Yeah. So I think when I have a theme or an idea that's present in my mind as I go through the days, or a piece of material like Polaroid stories, my vision is now kind of geared to absorbing information that allows the piece to marinate in a different way. So I think that you've got, as an actor, your body, your mood, your thoughts, you're a vessel and an instrument. And so just like a piano, you might be tuned a little differently every day based on the weather or whatever. So you and your scene partner are bringing your energies in to one space in one moment of one day. And it could be that we're hearing each other a little differently that day, or someone is really, I don't know, trying to activate the other person in a different way. And it's as they say, acting is reacting. So if we're listening and experiencing, or trying to experience this piece for the first time in our bodies, then if we're really open to the moment, there's no way it can be exactly the same. So as Mark was saying, we've got specificity that we follow, but we have to have a lot of freedom within our form, and we practice our form with a lot of grueling intention so that we can release and have freedom in performance. Yeah, I think that's what I have.
Thank you so much. Well, if anyone in the audience has any questions they would like to ask our panelists, feel free to unmute yourselves, turn your video on, or if you would like to type your question in the chat, I can read your question from there. But we are gonna turn it over to you guys. And we have some backup questions too.
I know that one of the students here has a particular question, but I won't point out the student, of course, because that would be a horrible thing to do. But one of my students was curious, Mark, why an orange and not a pomegranate?
My stress response
just
to
hard to
that,
come by.
my stress response to that question is astronomical.
Yeah. Yeah. Andrew's got a really good take on that one. I would say because that's what Izuka wrote. She wrote an orange. And I have suspicions as to why she wrote the orange. And Andrew, there's a certain methodical, I mean, not that there isn't with a pomegranate, there's a certain methodical action to peeling an orange that lends itself to that scene. And as Andrew has stated on many occasions, no orange peels the same. It's always going to be different. And so I just think it provides, and plus, one of the other things is that everybody kept saying, "Oh man, I could smell the orange. I could smell it." Right? It puts off, an orange puts off quite an aroma, more so than other fruits. And I think that's part of it, is to catalyze that 4D sense, so people could really smell the orange. I think that might be part of it too. But Andrew could, go further.
And I don't know if anybody has, how many of you have smelled a fresh orange blossom? And I don't know which came first, the theatricality of the orange as the fruit of the underworld, or the monologue that precedes it, or actually surrounds it. But it is just like amazingly fragrant. Oh man.
See you, dude. Oh, you're
Dude,
there.
welcome back.
Okay.
Amazingly fragrant. And there's also that emotional recall. I also don't know where Naomi's from and where she grew up, but I mean, if you're in Florida groves, I would imagine that that's a pretty abundant scent, especially during this time, like how she talks about it snowing. But there's also, I mean, because you think about an apple, it's like, well, an apple's way easier to do because you can just like aggressively like right and share bites. And I've also had thoughts during rehearsal, like, I have a switchblade in my pocket. I could use that, and that would be easier to peel with the orange. But it's interesting because the orange has a really, really hard exterior, but once you get into the middle of it, it's a really fragile fruit. So I think that the symbolism of that is like, you've got to get through this hard exterior that's really, really protective. And then as soon as you're on the inside, wow, like one of the softest, most succulent, flavorful explosions, right? So I think it's kind of that dichotomy. And I pomegranate, would be really, really appropriate, but I've also just never seen somebody like crack open a pomegranate and eat it. And I think Naomi had enough of a mind of theatrics to know that that would be pretty hard to do for the scene. Might be pretty interesting, but yeah, I've never accomplished that with any sense of grace or delicacy. So, but I think the symbolism is nice of the hard exterior and the really, really nice, juicy inside once you finally get there, especially for the scene, because it's the moment where you've got that switch, and that's G at arguably his most vulnerable of the play. And then Eurydice's finally warming up to it. And then right after that, she tries to get up and leave. And he says, "What are you afraid of?" She's like, "I'm not afraid of anything." He's like, "No, I know that's not true, but I also know that it's not love. You're not afraid of love. You're afraid of dying." So it's a nice framing device and a nice visual, physical representation of what's happening around the scene.
And the color. It's a very striking color. I can't speak for every production of Polaroid stories that's ever been produced, but I really like the idea of bright, vibrant colors coming against darkness and shadow. And so I think that the orange really pops.
That
And
was actually.
Well, I think it's one of the only fruits that I have an experience of eat, and I find myself salivating. Like anytime I see somebody going into a mandarin, I was thinking this. We were on a hike last weekend with some friends in town, and one of them was eating a mandarin, and I was sitting with like hard boiled eggs. Right, I'm looking at the orange, and I'm salivating for the orange, and I'm like, oh, that's a really interesting device, right? Because I don't have that sense with an apple or a banana, or I don't know. I guess I don't clock myself with pomegranates that often, but I think an orange is very much like I know what that person is going through right now.
Speaking on the color idea and the vibrant colors in Polaroid stories, I know that was a big part of the set design, was this neon spray paint. And I wanted to ask, what was your thinking in having the TV and the radios and the glow sticks? Because that was really interesting, like experimental kind of territory, which I really enjoyed.
Well, for me, I wanted to bring out the. To me, this play has its origins in hip hop, and so with hip hop, you have dance. As some of the cornerstones of hip hop culture, you have dance, you have graffiti art, and then you have the music. And so I wanted to bring all three of those elements into it. So I started playing with the idea of this world being a post media dystopian with like these forgotten elements of media past, the ghost of media past, old TVs that weren't of use anymore, that had been tagged up with graffiti and had been and could. Plus, I also didn't have like a huge budget, so I had to think outside the box as far as finding levels in the Eagles and finding and evoking this world in a way that felt sort of post-apocalyptic to me. So I really like this idea of discarded media. So in addition to the old school radios that we had, we got all these old dead TVs, keyboards, clocks, and all kinds of things that at one point in time were, the pinnacle of whatever technology was available to that time, to that place and time. But now they're discarded and forgotten, and like a lot of these people in the world as well. I really like the idea of contrasting the super bright colors against, like I said before, against the darkness and the shadow. All of it is to not only evoke a world on a limited budget that is transformative, but to also reflect the characters themselves. So I guess that's what I would say. Anybody else?
Again, I just want to open it up to the audience. Oh, yeah, we got a question. If an audience member took only one thing away from the show, what would you want it to be? Could we have every panelist answer this question? Yeah, okay, great.
Why don't you indicate the order in which you'd like us to go, Kate?
Okay, my
No,
screens
but don't
go.
start with me.
Okay, my screens go Mark, Andrew, Ben, Hunter, Kata, and T.
I would like people to take away a renewed sense of humanity, I'd say, of their own humanity and other people's humanity in general, humanity in specific, a renewed sense, a reimagined sense, perhaps a more compassionate sense. I find that through the darkness, you see the light. So the darker it is, the more potential there is for light. So that would be my wish.
Kind of along that same line, I mean, I struggle to try to prescribe a lot of absolutes in art in general, but I think that what I look for a lot whenever I see theater and whenever I send people to theater, if I see something and want to recommend it to somebody, it's a sense of triggering of empathy or being able to associate oneself with it. So I think this is kind of along the same lines of what Mark is saying, is that and one of the big reasons of doing it in Bozeman, where like especially at the Eagles, I mean, like walk out the front door and you can probably see somebody that reminds you of somebody in that show, you know, or if not, just like walk a couple blocks down to the park. And yeah, and with this one, I guess it's kind of abstract in a certain way that I want there to be very little meaningless moments of silence in the commute on the way home from the theater with everybody. It's something that you can't really sit down at the bar afterwards and have a conversation with the actors about it in this time that we're in. But yeah, just a sense of um, heartfelt connection in a surprising way.
Yeah, I'd just like to add one thing really quick based on something that Andrew said also. I don't like, I want everyone to come away with something different. I think I would say more than anything. I would consider it a grand success if everybody took away something different, and all of the conversations that people were having post show were varied in their responses, and that they were left with more questions than answers. I think that's what a really good piece of drama does.
Who's next, Kate?
Ben, I think you were next.
Oh. So I don't think that a safe space is a space in which you don't or won't or can't feel uncomfortable, a space that protects you from those kinds of feelings. I have really serious questions about the value of a space that's like that, and I especially don't think that that's the sort of space that theater should be. But I think theater should be a safe space in the sense of a safe space being a place where you can feel uncomfortable sort of safely, where you can sort of witness things that are disturbing without them actually, posing an actual threat to your own person. So one of my students after the play said to the rest of the students in the class, "You're going to feel viscerally uncomfortable for the entire duration of the show in a good way." And I think that that's a really valuable experience to have. And I think that it's the kind of experience that live theater in particular, maybe more so than any other art form, allows for. And so I think that that's a really important thing to just sort of open yourself up to the possibility of going into the plays. That sort of identification and connection with everything that's happening on the stage in a way that's visceral and maybe uncomfortable and really thought-provoking, where then afterwards, when you get in the car or walking home with your friend or your roommate or whatever, you can have those conversations that all of a sudden just kind of come gushing out with all these thoughts and feelings that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been tapped for another week, another month, another year, another decade. That's what I think.
Hunter, I think you were next.
Yeah, I agree with Ben a lot. Danny and I talk about this kind of thing a lot, and there's a weird diplomatic relationship between the actors on stage and the audience, and I truly believe that as an actor, the job is not to, like as soon as you try to make someone feel something or think something, they're instantly going to, just block it away. That's human nature. There has to be a sort of diplomatic relationship. So we have to serve the story itself as it presents itself through our own interpretation, using our experience to inform that performance. And to Ben's point, then, with that, then theory or a theater in a philosophical sense is, to use that Danny's favorite grad school word, the communitas, that feeling of being together, all experiencing the same thing. And even though we're not necessarily thinking the same thing, because that's impossible, but we all feel this sense of connectivity all through us, no matter who we are, whether or not we're looking at each other, whether or not we can even acknowledge each other. But the fact that we're all in the same room experiencing this visceral thing in front of us brings us together in a human sort of way. I mean, the beginning of humanity is to tell stories, and that is and we have to go back to that in order to remind ourselves who we are, where we are, why we are, and how we move forward through the things. And that's the fun thing about like theater versus television, where you can get across the same themes, the same art, the same explorations and whatnot, but there is nothing compared to that ephemeral feeling of being connected to the person that's sitting in the same room with you, feeling the emotions or feeling the story and experiencing all that is in front of them just the same as you. So, I mean, I can't say anything specific as to, like what I would want, but just let us remind ourselves constantly that we need that kind of thing, that we have to experience these kinds of things together, that it's not dead, even though we're so used to separating ourselves even further and further and further and further away from each other through the uses of technology and other art forms and media and all that thing. As they are great, this is something that is entirely unique that we cannot forget. And that's always just kind of it's just always such a nice thing to be reminded by an audience member, that like somebody who's never been to a play before for the first time, and just, how much of an experience it's so visceral and effective.
For me, yes, compassion, yes, humanity, tenderness. I think that we are, of course, experiencing such a unique moment worldwide, where, globally we're being impacted by the force of this virus. And I think it's been such an awakening and such an opportunity for bearing witness. So for this show, I hope that it offers an opportunity to bear witness, which to me is dissolving the separation between self and other, So yeah, I think that's it. That's what I got.
Guess it's my turn. A takeaway from the show. I think one thing that, if anything, the audience were to take away is sort of the realness of it, the gritty realness. There's an absurd truth to the play, and how it exists. And I think about it a lot in its language. And I mean, the play is about the narrative arc about the play are the Greek mythologies. But when you break down, when I think about the language and I break down the language, there's a weird truth to how it's utilized, and it affects a sense of realness to the characters that I don't think, if the language was like truly poetic, not truly poetic, I don't know how to phrase it the right way, but if the language was in essence more proper poetry, that you'd get lost. I mean, as someone who grew up in a very heavy urban environment, I was thinking about some of these conversations that the characters are having. I was like, no, yeah, that sounds about right. That's how you use those words. That is exactly how that kind of conversation would go, and that in turn lends some truth to, like, right, these are how the characters are living. So if there's anything the audience would take away from it, it's like, this is absurdly real. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here today and for answering that question. Thank you for asking that question, Morgan. That was wonderful. If you would like to ask more questions of the panelists, um, in I'm gonna put the attendance link in the chat now. Feel free to write questions and I can email any questions forward and keep a communication link going, because I think this is a really amazing opportunity to have you answer these questions and talk about this show. It's been really great. So thank you everyone for being here tonight, and hopefully you have a great rest of your night.
Thanks,
And students,
everyone.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a great show
I'm
this
looking
weekend.
forward to Saturday night. Yeah.
Yeah, come see the show if y'all haven't already.
Hey, Kate,
Yeah.
before you go, I didn't get a chance to address your question from earlier.
What was that?
At the very beginning, before everything started, you said, I'm going to ask you a specific question. And then I lost my feed.
Oh, I did. I asked in the blocking of the scene between T and another actor, it was the two lovers, and they were talking about how they were so in love that they were going to become one. And you had the blocking so that they were like straining against one another. And I asked Ben, we read the myth of Salmacis and Hermaphroditus in class, and that evoked that in my mind. And I was wondering if that was written or that was entirely your idea to have that blocking.
She didn't really put any specifics into this play, as her stage directions are very open-ended and abstract. That's one of the things I love about the way she writes, is that she allows the director to take a lot of license with choices that they've made. So that wasn't written in necessarily like, oh, block them like this, but nor did I have that particular myth in mind either when I blocked that scene. It just felt natural. And I took a lot of my cues from the actors and how they were responding to one another, physically and emotionally with each scene, and let them come up with a lot of the movement on their own. So I think it was just kind of a perfect storm of all those things.
Yeah, well, it was extremely impactful. My friend and I saw that on opening night, and I kid you not, the whole walk home was like 20 minutes, and we could not stop talking about y'all's performances and the set design and the music and the choreography. So we're big fans. Thank you
Cool.
for putting on this show and especially through all I know it was a hard process, but thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Kate.
Absolutely. Have a great show this weekend. Good luck on closing night. Break a leg.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for putting this together too.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna close out the meeting. Bye.